Hi there, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of this weekly roundup of some of the main, or some of the themes that we found particularly interesting over the last week. Today, we're going to talk about two things. So that's Ralph Hebgen, ex-research analyst extraordinaire and very good mate. And we are going to be talking about, number one, we're going to be talking about plastics, and secondly, we are going to be talking about ChatGPT and the effects and implications of AI. So before we talk about that, in the background, I notice you have some animals, Ralph.
Got a bull.
Nice.
And there is a bear.
Fantastic. Why is the bear on top of the book then?
Because otherwise you can't see it, because the camera doesn't focus. Yeah,
Okay.
there's nothing else there.
Oh, okay.
Just enjoy. Enjoy the bulls and the bears.
This is such rich content that we have every week.
Take the boy out of the city, but
yes,
right.
Yes.
Okay,
very nice, good. Right, okay. Cool. So let's talk about the first thing, which is about plastics. So
yes,
very important thing. This has happened this week. So three environmental groups are taking Danone to court. And they are saying that Danone is not doing enough to cut increasing plastic pollution. Now, Danone, which is owns brands like Evian and what's that yogurt one called? There's a yogurt one.
Just yogurt.
Activia. There we go. Activia. Oh, yeah. So those basically, it owns various brands, incredibly well known. It's arguing that it's doing more than a lot of its rivals in terms of the reduction of the use of virgin plastics, but that's not really the question. Anyway, the reason why I thought this is particularly interesting is because it is obviously a very hot topic at the moment. Plastics, single-use plastics. I mean, we've seen in the news this week that the UK is going to move towards the banning of single-use plastic. So if you like getting a kebab on the way home, for instance, or chips or whatever it may be, you're not going to be getting plastic forks and things like that. So I do think this is very, this also shows how much this is part of the national consciousness at the moment. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I think this is going to be amazing. This is going to be very interesting. And if the result goes the way of the environmentalists, then I think this will have huge implications on the likes of Pepsi, on Coca-Cola, on Mondelez, Diageo, Mars, also all the Procter & Gamble, Reckitt Benckiser, Unilever, all of these people, because basically at some point, presumably, they are going to have to put money into a pot that will be used to clean the environment. But anyway, what do you think, Ralph? Any particular thoughts on that?
Yeah, my juvenile mind sprang immediately to put money into a pot, into a yogurt pot. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm just not mature enough to be on this show. Good. Anyway, what I find all this very interesting, because my mind springs to things like asbestos and the long-standing issue which the insurance companies had with these liabilities which were coming out of a disease which was not diagnosed before 30 years, that it actually became noticeable. And of course, the other obvious and perhaps troubling analogy is the tobacco litigation against tobacco companies, who all had a litigation fund against upcoming or potential negative court verdicts. Now, there are parallels, I think, but it's not exactly the same. And I had one thought which I'd like to present to you, if I may. This is relative to the tobacco industry. I mean, the tobacco industry also faced a change in Well, the way society accepted and looked at tobacco products over decades. But it wasn't that long. I mean, 3 decades ago, when you actually watch movies which were made 3 decades ago, you see people lighting up all the time in offices everywhere.
Cigarettes, right? Not just randomly, spontaneously combusting.
No, it's mostly cigarettes.
You just saw people in films lighting up. Wow,
excellent!
That's amazing. How'd you do that? Sorry.
I think spontaneous combustion is a thing of Dickens' novels, so that's basically 19th century. So no, interesting enough, it wasn't people exploding into flame at the conference table. It was people lighting up a cigarette, and everywhere. So obviously, this attitude has completely changed, and it didn't change because of voluntary restriction of people not to smoke in public. Of course, there was regulation coming in which banned smoking in public places, etc. We know the story. Now, the tobacco companies were basically reasonably glib all the way through this debate. They were just basically saying, well, it's not our choice to smoke, it's your choice to smoke, and therefore we can't be held liable. Well, it's obviously a bit too simplistic because they were advertising and there was a certain amount of coaxing other people going on in order to pick up cigarettes, and that is why advertisements on television and then later on public billboards disappeared, etc. Now, it is sort of tempting, perhaps, or at least to me, it was tempting when I saw this news item about the plastics to draw an analogy here. But I do wonder to which extent this analogy is valid. The analogy which I had is, well, this could take decades to go anywhere. But I'm checking myself in this assessment, and I wonder whether if the environmentalists win this case, this would not actually lead to a relatively swift replacement of plastic products with plastic alternatives. And the key reason that I see would be the potential reputational loss of these companies. Because if you look at what these companies are and who these companies are, not all of them, but in part, they are actually people who sell stuff which is supposedly healthy to you. So it's not as if somebody is giving you a stick which gives you cancer. It is a company which hands you a pot of yogurt with bioproactive organisms and cultures in it, which are supposedly good for you. Or it's somebody who hands you a bottle of water, which is decidedly good for you when you drink it, etc. And so I think that Danone will wish to limit very quickly any negative fallout and any negative association which might be building with its brand, and therefore be very open to putting more research funding into finding an alternative to plastics. And also companies which perhaps are not having the good of the nation's health in mind as much, people who sell you sugary drinks like Coca-Cola, etc., they will also be interested in minimizing any negative fallout. Because if you think about Coca-Cola advertisements, Pepsi-Cola, etc., which you see in cinemas and on television, they all work on the good life and the light-hearted and adventure and how cool life is with Coca-Cola and how comparatively grey and miserable it is without. Now, that sort of subliminal message would also get a little bit lost if people sensitize themselves even more to the fact that by drinking Coca-Cola, you just basically ruin the oceans of this world. And I think in general, we are at the stage where the public is more highly sensitized, more aware of environmental issues everywhere. And so I think, in short, that if the environmentalists get their way in this court judgment, it might usher in a short period of transition from these plastics to plastic alternatives.
No, I agreed. I mean, the other thing I would say in addition to that, is really, I think maybe with asbestos and for tobacco, one of the reasons why things took so long to get done was you had to prove that, say, as being exposed to asbestos caused a specific conditions, and with tobacco, that the tobacco was actually the cause of specific conditions. Whereas I would suggest that, is plastic bad for the environment? I would suggest that that's easier to prove, to prove the causation and what the effects may be. So as a result of that, maybe it's easier. But like you say, you have said before, if you were acting as a lawyer for the companies, you would be saying, yeah, but it doesn't, what we're doing is not causing damage and we're offsetting it with this, that, and the other. They could try and drag it out, but because of the potential reputational damage, it may well be quicker and also that, more people have their products, I guess. I mean, everyone has, unless you're vegan, of course, have it as yogurts and things, but, they provide products that everyone uses in some way or another, in plastic bottles, containers, all that sort of thing. So I'd say this is more widespread. There is more a broad industry. So if you are a company that maybe positions yourself as having responsible packaging, it may well be that everyone shifts over to that, and that's how the whole market moves. So anyway,
exactly. That's why I think it could be quicker than you would have expected otherwise, because you may well be right. It might be easier to show a negative impact on the environment. But nevertheless, this impact is non-specific, by which I mean, if I was a lawyer working for Danone, I would say, well, show me that was our plastics, which is causing this. I mean, basically, even before I get there, you have to actually show that the presence of plastics in the environment are making their way into the human gut via microplastics and what the food chain exactly is, and then also why and in which specifically how it is damaging to a human organism's health, etc. And then, of course, to the extent that any liability action would be specific to a specific company, Danone, for example, you then have to show that it is Danone's plastics which have contributed to this. So, I mean, this could drag out forever, which is why I'm thinking it might not, because of a company's intention to avoid any reputation loss and negative association with an otherwise healthy product.
Fair enough.
And that would be good. I mean, where I'm sitting, which is here, is I would be highly pleased by
in the London studio.
In the London studio with the bears and whatever. No, but joking aside, I would be highly pleased with this, because another drawn out legal battle which shows any positive social impact over decades would not necessarily be something that I'd applaud. But if this could change within a few years, I think the world would be certainly better off without plastics everywhere.
Absolutely. Right then, so let's talk about the big subject that came out this week. So this started off with, Microsoft saying that they're considering putting $10 billion into OpenAI, which makes ChatGPT, and this is, in my opinion, an absolutely massive development, and the way that ChatGPT has been used and experimented on thus far would suggest that there are the applications, the breadth of the applications that could be used, that ChatGPT could be used for both good and bad, is huge. So before we carry on, if you could tell the viewers or listeners what it is exactly and how it works. That'd be great.
Yes, I mean, I'm obviously not an AI engineer or any particularly knowledgeable person in the world of software engineering, but in my own words, it is a language-based AI
not
system.
generated by AI, right? Your own words, not generated by AI.
Well, how would you be able to tell?
That's true.
Which is precisely the issue, of course, we're going to discuss. But in my own words, as a human being, checkbox, I'm not a robot. Actually, on that subject, this is, of course, what we're doing now. I'm not a robot, that's easy. But then, of course, there are these other verification methods where they ask you to identify all the panels with bridges or with words.
Or traffic lights or something,
I always fail that.
You get the get the follow-up thing, don't you? It's like, you're too stupid to do it right, so we've got an extra question for you.
Exactly. Please qualify by filling in this Mensa IQ test, and only if you pass, you are able to access our website and buy a pot of yogurt in a biodegradable bucket of plastic. Anyway, so where was I?
So talking about what it is, what it is, and
So it's a language-based AI system, which means you can interact with it. If you go on the website OpenAI, there is a little. You have to sign up to it, and then you can interact with it. There is a prompt which allows you to put in, for example, a question, or you can give it a command, and then it goes away and does it. For example, you can ask it which country is the biggest country in Latin America, and it will compose a little paragraph of a text for you. It would say Latin America is a landmass in the southern hemisphere, etc., blah, blah, and the biggest country by territory is this, and it will give you a quantification of it, etc. So it's almost like you can say it's like an essay writing machine, because it also does more complicated things. You can ask it, explain quantum physics in terms that a layman can understand. And it will basically then do that. And it gives you a text which might be, if I printed it out, a page long, or maybe even two A4 pages long. And it is a well-formulated, syntactically well-ordered paragraph in English, which you can understand, which avoids repetitions of words, which is stylistically well crafted, and gives you the information which you asked for. It is AI because the way it does it, as far as I understand these things, which is not very far, but I'm going to share my knowledge with you. It does it by just basically accessing, well, I was tempted to say all written pages on the internet. That's not true. It accesses a lot of the written material which it is open to it, and then looks for statements that might be useful in response to the question asked. It passes for context, so it is intelligent enough to do that. It predicts what the next word in its response should be. It predicts what the last word in the sentence should be. And it then basically looks at various scenarios and discards scenarios in accordance with certain benchmarks and criteria which are programmed into it. So that bit is very much similar to a genetic algorithm, and from it creates texts which can be eerily intelligent looking, and so that's what it is basically.
You used it, didn't you, this week?
No.
You
Why?
did?
Why do you ask? Okay.
Well, no, I thought you...
Yes, I have been a user of this for some time. It was released in November, but there was a beta version of this before, and because I'm a nerd, I have been using it a lot. I asked it to write me something in the style of Shakespeare. But because I'm also juvenile, I asked it to write me. I'm sorry, guys. I asked it to write me a story about farting in the style of Shakespeare. And this is what it came up with. And I'm just going to read you one or two lines to illustrate how creative sounding this thing actually is. This is Othello coming on stage saying, "O cursed fate, what malady doth afflict my loins, and from my nether regions rift such noxious fumes? A stench most vile and rank, that doth offend the senses, and outrank all other smells. O cursed farting, why must thou torment me so, and make me sigh?" I mean, my hat is off, as you can see, to the AI. That is wicked. That is amazing. That's cool.
It is amazing. And I also feel that if there's anyone from the Royal Shakespeare Company watching, I believe that Ralph is generally available, although probably in the afternoons, not so much in the morning. But yeah, I'll have to, put contact details of Ralph's agent on something. I don't know yet.
This is majorly funny.
Yeah.
If I had been able to write this myself and actually credit it to myself, I could sell that. If I did this in a book, like 100 pages of this kind of stuff, I could sell this as a Shakespeare parody. And people would find this funny. I mean, I find this funny. I mean, for example, this thing where it says, "A stench most violent rank, that doth offend the senses and outrank all other smells." I looked for this on the internet. I typed this in to see whether that exists somewhere.
Yeah.
And Google didn't find it. So the AI must have put that together itself. And it puts together an adjective meaning, well, vile smelling, and a verb meaning put something into a hierarchy, prioritize. That's a pun. That's excellent.
Do you know, I love the way that you analyse. I didn't even think about it like that. But yes, you're right though. You're right. I mean, I think that it is really amazing. That is an amusing example of the use of this. But I think there can be some very serious implications here. I mean, one of the things I've thought, this could potentially change education, because how, does it mean that exams are going to have to change? Because if, let's say, part of the assessment is writing an essay, how do you prove that that's not AI? You would have to get people to write an essay in front of you and then do it, or
yes, correct.
Or are you going to change exams to make them interview based, so that you have to say to people what your knowledge is? All of these kinds of things. It could have very major consequences, I think.
Well, this may actually have indeed major consequences for education. I think that's probably a side effect of this. It's important, but it doesn't really tell us what the technological potential of this development is. But nevertheless, to focus on that, there's an even wider context here. I think it forces us as in humans to think about what determines things like originality, creativity. What is it that makes a creative human thought creative? Again, my example here, violent rank to outrank. That's a pun. That's a clever pun, which it did not copy from somewhere else. I checked. There's not a human inventing this. This is the AI passing for context and putting this together itself. And I find that original. I don't think there is anybody who can say that's not original, but it is not a human mind which put that together. And so that's one thing. So in terms of how this would now inform tests and exams, yeah, okay. I mean, essay writing, if it is exam-based, which have to be done in a locked room, and people put their mobiles and iPads, leave them by the door in a big basket, that can be done quite easily. But that's not really how research at the universities works. In a research paper, the entire point is that you go away and you research something for a week and then hand in your assignment at the end of it. And who is therefore to say that OpenAI didn't do it? Now, there are ways in which OpenAI itself will allow a detection of it itself as an author by putting an undetectable cryptography in its output. So I'll give you a simple example. It's going to be much more complicated. Every fifth letter is a K or something. It's that sort of nature. So there are certain patterns which will be built into the text which it generates, similar to a watermark, and then it would be detectable as something authored by AI and not by a student, for example. So these things are possible, but you are, of course, right. I mean, this goes to this is why I think this might actually go much further than that. Say a calculator, pocket calculator. What it enables me to do is, let's say, take the square root of 1189. There's no problem. I can do this. There it is. I can't do that in my head. If I were to do it in my head, I would have to do it on a piece of paper and interpolate between two others, which I can find. But that takes a lot of time, and arguably, it is a low-level intellectual capability, which is being replaced by something which is akin to looking something up in a list. This is not the right analogy, however, because this might replace much more high-level intellectual capabilities. Essay writing, the composition of a text, the intellectual investigation and analytical composition of thought is, I would argue, central to human intellect. And if that can be replaced undetectably by a student, then they may never learn it. Yes, they will only ever harm themselves at the end of this process, but until this harm is done, there is no check on it, or there might not be. So that's the danger. But the potential of this is, of course, something which Microsoft is currently detecting. I mean, they're basically saying we're going to build this into all of our products. This, I would think, is going to be potentially a disruptive event because it's direct competition to search engines like Google and Yahoo and others. And so the future, I think, is bright. This is a incisive technology which has huge potential for the development of intelligence-based text and analysis and research papers.
No, I totally agree. I mean, I think that this has so many potential uses. It's going to be a case of, I think that there needs to be there's going to be a need for detecting this as well, to make sure that people aren't taking credit for it. But then the problem as well, I mean, I think that this could well be very revenue generative for lawyers, because there will be lots of maybe journalists or artists or whatever, really getting involved and saying, look, they're using my work, therefore I should get paid, because there will be some evidence somewhere of what what the software has used to inspire it to make its end product.
Yeah.
So I think this would be really interesting. It's very I think that Microsoft shows foresight in investing that, because I think that the implications are,
Yes.
I mean, huge. And so everyone else is going to want to play catch up. I suspect there'll be loads of money trying to find the next OpenAI, because OpenAI is more at the forefront. So I suspect everyone else is going to put money into something else. So we'll see what happens there.
No, indeed. I mean, I could, of course, for example, publish this text, not credit the AI with it, and claim I've done this myself. So that would be one act of plagiarism, which arguably I could and should be sued for. But it still would need to be proven that I've actually done this. Now, the evidence is clear. I've typed it into OpenAI. I'm sure the evidence is still there, and it can be detected. But yeah, I mean, what if I type in "write me a song in the style of Ed Sheeran," for example? It comes out, and I'm sure it's going to be a good song. And then he would have a claim, I think, for a plagiarism case. But these things can, of course, be detected. But then, of course, if I just type in write me a rap song, and it would do it, well, what's the harm in that? I mean, this is, of course, going to be interesting. There's going to be a competition between a human intellect and a machine-based intellect. Maybe what we're inventing here, and this is early days to say this, but what we're inventing here is the first alien intelligence, the first non-human intelligence. And I think it is glib to say for humans, but machines can never be creative, for example. Well, a stench most violent rank, which outranks, this is reasonably creative, but it is a machine analog of creative. It's not the same way in which a human intellect is creative. And so I think this could enrich the world very materially, and will. And this is just the start, of course. The next version of this of OpenAI, of this program, is, I think, going to be released later this year. And progress in some technologies is not linear; it's exponential. So watch this space. There are going to be very interesting developments coming.
I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing. Lots to come from that, and I hope to hear more about this, because I don't know, I mean, AI, I remember when I first started talking about AI at the beginning of when I wrote Watson's Daily. Well, I mean, actually before Watson's Daily, when it was Watson's Wi-Fi. I think in my first ever Watson's Yearly, I said AI was going to be a big theme. And AI is one of those things. AI, VR, same thing, same kind of deal, in the sense that there's loads of hype about them, but it never hasn't really grabbed the attention as much as everyone thought they would at that point. So you're constantly thinking, oh, when's it going to be? When's this really going to come in? When's this really going to kick in? And I would say this is a big moment.
Yeah.
This is a big moment.
Yeah, I think so too. I would not be surprised if by the end of this decade, we see societies having changed in the same way as they have changed over the last 20 years through the advent of the internet. Just as an anecdote on that, quick one, my wife and I, we just watching again some episodes of The West Wing. You can remember The West Wing, and so we're watching like several episodes of this, and then I heard myself say to my wife, "Sweetie, what is with all these people? They're all carrying these paper copies of newspapers around. They're unwieldy. You can't read them. What is going on?" And as I was getting to the end of my statement, I thought, wow, I actually meant that. That was a real question. The world has changed so much in the last 2 decades that I genuinely find it weird if somebody carries around a paper copy of a newspaper.
Yeah,
and if you look at this technology, by the end of this decade, one thing which it will definitely do is it will increase the bar again below which something is viewed as unskilled. Because that's what you have said, of course. Everybody who is engaged in their profession with the writing of texts, journalists, equity analysts, lawyers to some extent, will find some of their skills outsourced to machines, and we will all use it in order to just basically get the skeleton text up and then just fill in the blanks. So I can see huge applications here, and that's probably why I don't know where the valuation comes from, but it's been valued allegedly at $29 billion, which is an oddly specific number. So I don't know how it works, but one obvious application is chatbots. Everybody who communicates with customers via a direct text and the chat facility is going to want to use this, because the current quality of this chatbot is quite appalling, as we all know.
So there we go.
Yes.
We'll just end on that note.
I have, by the way, for a long time suspected that Watson's Daily was written by a robot. So
it is most definitely written by a human.
Yeah? Who is that? Is that you?
Yeah. Yes, it is me.
Oh, okay. Just ask. Okay,
no,
just ask.
It would be nice if it could write a lot of it, but at the moment it doesn't. So yeah. Anyway, well, on that, thank you very much, Ralph, as always. You can put that mask on now that's behind you.
Yes, it's my mum does these artworks. Yeah,
it's amazing.
Just a little bit of product placing here.
I'm
sure nobody noticed.
A talented family. Anyway, thank you very much indeed. As always, been a lot of fun.
Cool.
And we'll be back here next week.
Absolutely. Cheers, guys.
Bye.